Let's be honest, sovereign sister. Nervous system regulation has become such a buzzword. Everyone's talking about it, everyone is saying it, and yet most women still feel stuck. Why? Well, because the real journey of generational healing, because that's what you're doing when you're rewiring the nervous system, regulating the nervous system, rewiring the brain. Guess what? It's not all love and light. It's not all good vibes. It's not even a cute morning routine. The real generational healing journey is actually this: learning how to stay aware when your body wants to leave. Why? Well, because generational trauma doesn't just live in the stories that you know, it lives in your nervous system settings. The urgency, the shutdown, the burnout, the people pleasing, the you disappearing because you're afraid to be seen. So today I'm going to give you what most content never gives you: a very clean definition, no fluff, not all love and light, a real map, a process, what you can expect if you yourself are regulating and rewiring your nervous system. You might not know it, but you're doing this from patterns of generational trauma. We're going to cover three things very importantly in today's podcast episode. One, what regulation actually is, which it's not calm, let me tell you that right now. It's capacity. It's your capacity to deal with life, to face life with sovereignty, because life will always be life. Number two, what rewiring actually means and how you know it's actually even happening in your day-to-day life. Number three, why awareness actually scares you. And this is a big component as it relates to generational healing and the nervous system. And we're going to look at specifically why Jesus Christ or Joshua in A Course in Miracles says that the deeper issue here is not what you think it is. It's actually your authority problem with God, with the higher power. A fear of knowing and accepting who created you, a fear of fully being seen, not by the world, but by a higher power, by God. Because we've been taught of this false God in religion that sits on a chair all day and judges us. And we're going to look at the ego, which is your programming and its fantasy that we could even author ourselves. Now, by the end of this episode, you're going to be able to tell the difference between a trigger, between a survival road, between the sovereign moment where awareness actually stays online. So buckle up and join me. Thank you for joining us. My name is Veronica Barragan. I'm a trauma-informed Kundalini Yoga therapist, and I'm also the founder of the Sovereign Sisterhood Movement and Sanctuary, which is a virtual sanctuary for first-time generational cycle breakers like you. Our mission is simple: to end cycles of generational trauma that are wired into the nervous system and brain through Kundalini Yoga therapy, and to shift the perception and meaning that we give to traumatic experiences by healing the mind through the teachings of Jesus and A Course in Miracles, so that we break the generational pattern at the root, not just treat symptoms. Why? Well, because when one woman restores her sovereignty, because that's what happens, you return back to your truth, through to your actual satnam, is what we call it in Kundalini Yoga. When that happens, you heal 7 generations before and after you. And then what happens? The whole world heals. We're not just talking about healing here. We are training sovereignty, one awareness moment at a time, which is how the nervous system actually becomes regulated. Now, before we drop in, if this speaks to you already, I would love for you to share this episode with another sister. Hit that subscribe button, please. And also drop a heart below in the comments if it's resonating, or leave your questions. I'm here to assist you and help you answer them. Now, let's get started, because today's podcast episode, even when I was getting prepared for it and writing it out, I had this moment of like extreme purge and peace, because the words that I'm going to be sharing with you today, you're not going to be learning anything. Like I always say, you're remembering. That's how you restore sovereignty, and your cells know it, your nervous system knows it, your brain. And so we're going to break it down today in a very fundamental way, where even if you've never done any type of healing journey, this is going to resonate and it's going to be simplified so that you can start to apply it in your day-to-day life. Because, like I said, everyone in their mama is talking about nervous system. And if you go back to the times that I started talking about this, it was way back in 2017, 2018, when my journey really took a beautiful turn as Kundalini Yoga found me. And I understood, and not just through books as becoming a Kundalini Yoga therapist, but also through my personal experience. That was the most powerful aspect of my learning. It was my own personal experience of rewiring my nervous system and my brain through Kundalini Yoga therapy and, of course, in miracle spiritual psychotherapy that allowed me to break a lot of generational cycles in my lineage. Starting with alcoholism, I've now been alcohol free for 7 years with no cravings because not because I replaced it with something like Kundalini Yoga, it's because Kundalini Yoga and, of course, the miracles rewired my nervous system and brain. But that doesn't mean that I'm not a human being that doesn't have emotions anymore. And I think when a lot of people talk about nervous system regulation, they make it so simplified that they make it seem like if you are doing anything to change your nervous system, that you should never ever feel angry again, that you should never feel sad, that you should never go back to that old pattern. Because if you do, then something really is wrong with you or you're not doing it right. And we miss out on understanding that the journey is not only not all love and light, but that there are peaks and valleys, and that it feels like the tarot card, the Wheel of Fortune, where sometimes it feels like you move 5 steps forward and then you go back two. Although it's only two, many of us make that even more dramatic and think that it's actually like 18, right? But because we don't understand that the rewiring and the regulation of our nervous system is cyclical, it's not linear, it's not starting point A to Z. In fact, you have to very often, 100% of the time, go back many times to the same pattern because what actually breaks the pattern is the way you respond when it shows up. Problem here is that most of us, because our nervous systems are so hijacked by chronic stress, adrenaline, and cortisol, which is created and derived from patterns of generational trauma. You can blame your work, you can blame your boss, you can blame even your marriage. But if we look at the root cause of why you have been living under chronic stress or survival, it starts in the womb. It starts in what your parents and grandparents couldn't process themselves. And so today we're going to break it down so you understand what these peaks and valleys look like and how you can navigate this beautiful wheel of fortune where you understand what cycle you're in so that you don't sabotage yourself. Because a lot of women will get frustrated through the journey because they think they're doing it wrong, when in fact, those feelings of uncomfortableness, especially those feelings of triggers, of all of these different things, are actually the North Star to reflect back to us that there is change happening, and that in order for us to move through the change, we're gonna need to feel uncomfortable. Our nervous systems, when they do get to the point of rewiring, they actually build the capacity to feel safe to actually begin the healing journey. And if you don't understand this, you might think you're doing it wrong or there's something wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with you. We're not fixing anything. What you're doing is restoring your Saibong. Saibong is your soul identity. This is what we're working on this month inside of our community, the Sovereign Sister Sanctuary, because when we experience trauma, it's not what happens, it's what happens inside, which is what Dr. Gabor Mate says, which is basically we develop all of these crazy identities of who we think we are because our nervous system and brain become so impacted through the trauma. It's not just physical violence that is done upon us, right? Or maybe someone going to war and there's impact on the brain and the nervous system, emotional, sexual, all types of trauma, growing up with the mother who perhaps was depressed because of her own generational trauma patterns, growing up with a father who was depressed, possibly, or who was an alcoholic or who abandoned you. All those are traumatic experiences that then are going to impact the nervous system and brain, which is why we live under these states of chronic stress. So let's start first with understanding why awareness is actually so important, because that's correlated to capacity, which is what I'm talking about here. And let's look at specifically what does it feel like? What does it look like when you are rewiring, regulating your nervous system? And what can I expect from that journey? So, most women are trying to like regulate. And when they think regulate, they think I'm chasing calm. I need to be at peace. I need to be calm 24/7. But I can assure you that calm is not the goal. It is absolutely the after effect many times, but that's not the goal. That's not our intention because you're a human being. When your nervous system is rewired, that doesn't mean that one day your parents are not going to transition, or someone you love isn't going to transition, or someone you love isn't going to go through their own journey. You can't control people out there. What you can control is your nervous system and how you maintain it so that you have the capacity to deal with whatever is happening in front of you. A lot of people might equate that actually to like emotional intelligence, right? So the goal is not, I'm never going to have emotions again because you're a human being. The goal is, or the intention, or the willingness, let's not even call it the goal, is your capacity. Your capacity. Capacity means that you can actually stay present in your body while life is happening. If you're a business owner, if you're a CEO, or you're a leader within a corporate America, you need capacity in your nervous system to stay present. You need this in a relationship. You need this to be a parent. Imagine if in and think about like corporate America. I haven't been in corporate America since 2005. I've been an entrepreneur since 2005. But even when I was an entrepreneur, I was very involved in leadership. So I was very involved in local and national leadership within the real estate community. And I can assure you that many times we were in board meetings or we were in business meetings, right, with these people, and it felt like these were not adults, like they were children, children that were unconscious, children that were bickering, children that were basically not solution oriented but problem oriented because of their nervous systems. It's literally like they'd rather be right. That's the ego ruling. There's a beautiful line in A Course in Miracles. Jesus says, "Would you rather be right or would you rather be at peace?" And a lot of these meetings, it was like everyone just wants to be right, and that is a clear indicator that your nervous system needs a lot of rewiring and regulation. And that's why we build capacity, because it's not just that you're rewiring like the trauma patterns, it's so that you can move through life like a sovereign being in the business world, in your personal relationships, and with your children. And so, capacity means that you can stay present. I'm not saying calm. There might be adrenaline and cortisol moving through your body, which you can control, especially if something really challenging is happening in front of you, but you can stay present. Present means you're not projecting out your pain, you're not attacking back, you're present. You're not wasting your energy. Because when someone attacks you or there's a challenge, we have to remember they're not doing it because of your worth. They're doing it because they are unconscious and they're actually crying out for help. That's emotional intelligence. But when our nervous system is not regulated and it's lived under chronic stress for a long time, what happens is we make everything about ourselves. So somebody does something and you take it personal and you ruminate about it and you dwell on it for months. How is that serving you when you could be using that energy to create? It doesn't serve us, right? And that's why many cycle breakers struggle with this, because we didn't, as a cycle breaker, you may have not grown up being trained to stay in your body, to stay with yourself. In fact, it was always about how do I escape this body because what's happening in front of me is so horrible. It's so dangerous. The fighting, the infidelity perhaps in your with your parents, the scarcity, the maybe lack of resources. Again, this is not about blaming, but if this is what you went through as a child, as an adult, then you were never trained to stay and feel safe in your body. And that has everything to do with your nervous system. Because when your nervous system is living under chronic stress, especially for a long period of time, you're producing so much adrenaline and cortisol, which are hormones that they're not that they're bad. It's they're there to serve a purpose. They're there to help you. Like if a car is coming, the adrenaline, the cortisol is like run, run, right? But the problem is that when our nervous systems get hijacked by trauma, these states of consciousness constantly, then the nervous system and brain start to secrete just adrenaline and cortisol, and that is very unhealthy. Very unhealthy. That's what's stealing the capacity for you to be present in life and to be present in your body while life is happening. Because to for you, even though you can't voice it, what's happening is that there's World War III going on inside of you. And that's why many cycle breakers struggle because they grew up being trained to leave their bodies, to abandon themselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, especially when you grow up around chaos, criticism, addiction, control. A mother who was always worried, so she tried to control everything about your life, right? Again, we're not blaming, we're simply identifying these patterns. If you were grew up around silence, we don't talk about these things here. We don't no validation, right, about what you went through, which causes a lot of instability. Your nervous system is has learned that being present in your body is not safe. So your system got good at two survival moves. One, scanning outward because the nervous system is connected to the brain. So the brain becomes very hypervigilant, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Reading faces, like, can I trust you or not, right? Reading the tone, reading danger. And the second thing that happens is there's a disconnection that happens inward because feeling was not safe. And so that is why so many cycle breakers say, I live in my head. I just don't notice that I'm triggered until it's too late. I don't feel my body until I'm already reacting. This is not a personality flaw, I promise you. What this is, it's a nervous system coping mechanism. And it's the same nervous system coping mechanism that your ancestors have used for generation, that your parents, grandparents, great grandparents have used because it becomes an actual program. The DNA is not the problem. Epigenetics proves that it's the environment that activates certain DNA, right? So if we change the environment, what's your environment? I'm not saying getting rid of your parents and your children and all these people that irritate you. No, we got to change the environment that's causing the nervous system to be so altered, right? And by environment, it's a component of different things like getting oxygen through meditation to the brain. That's the environment. For example, changing the foods that you eat. Well, you can't change the foods you eat if you don't first regulate your nervous system because the reason you're reaching for the low frequency foods that put you in a state of unconsciousness is because your nervous system is not regulated. So you see how it works both ways? But you have to start first with the nervous system because otherwise you're going to continue to say, well, I just live in my head. This is who I am, a nervous person. That's not your personality. That's a coping mechanism that has been programmed into the DNA that's become activated because there's so much stress in your environment. You can change, you may not be able to change your physical environment, but you can process the stress that's created every single day through Kundalini Yoga meditation. And then, and of course, American Spiritual Psychotherapy, which we're going to go in through today. And then you're building the capacity to, even if you're in the most toxic environment, why, like Kundalini Yoga is not for someone who's going to be in a cave. You could be the president of a country and you're gonna need nervous system capacity to deal with life, right? Otherwise, you're gonna resort to the stereotypical story of someone who maybe makes a lot of money, right? Is in a very big leadership position. What happens to them? Or in the limelight? They typically resort to rugs or they resort to infidelities. They get divorced, have seven different marriages. Their kids don't talk to them. That's the stereotypical story of someone who rises, right? Especially when it comes to money, because it just makes you more of who you are. Money is not bad or good. It makes you more of who you are. So if you are a conscious person, amazing. If you are an unconscious person, this will be your demise because it's just going to make you more of that. And so we need to understand that these are not personality flaws. They're just the way your nervous system has been programmed to cope and to deal with life. Now, directly connected to the nervous system, we have to talk about awareness because the real problem is not that you have emotions. The real problem is that you don't have the capacity in the nervous system to become aware. The regulating moment in your life is actually the awareness. But I'm going to explain this to you because a big part of awareness is something that is known as introception, that we rebuild through Kundalini Yoga meditation, that cycle breakers, those that have experienced trauma, actually have lost their ability to do. And introception is like your sixth sense because it's actually your ability to sense what the body is messaging to you. So it's connected to awareness, but let's put language on it. And let's start first with understanding what introception is and why it's incredibly important to rebuild this, to retrain this as sovereignty in order for you to not only become more self aware, but to actually rewire the nervous system and understand what's happening in your body. Now, introception is basically your ability to feel what's happening inside your body. Believe it or not, a lot of women cannot feel what's happening in their body. Either they're numb or they keep themselves so busy with work, with the kids, so that they can avoid the messages that the body is giving to us. Because the body is very wise and intelligent. It's not there to punish us. But we think that illness, or we think that if the body's saying something to us, that we've done something wrong. And because we're using ways to cope with the pain, we're not present enough to listen to the message and to understand ourselves so that we can respond differently and actually break the pattern. So, introception is your ability to feel what's happening inside of your body. It's not an opinion, it's not your stories, it's the signals that your body's giving. For example, your breath. What is your breath doing? Again, if our nervous system is dysregulated chronically, what happens is we are not aware even about our breath. When I first started my journey with Kundalini Yoga to rewire these trauma patterns for my nervous system, I was first of all, I wasn't even aware of my breath. Second, when I started to become aware of my breath, I noticed that I was very like breathing very shallow all the time. It was always like below my belly button. And that can cause a really big problem for your organs because breath and prana has to move through the spine to purge and to clear and to regenerate all this oxygen into the brain, right? And so, why we do that is because our brain is so hypervigilant, waiting for the other shoe to drop, that our breath changes. So, it's in breath, it's in your heartbeat. A lot of women don't even notice when when their adrenaline and cortisol is up because the brain doesn't know the difference between a perceived experience and an actual experience. So, if you're just having a memory, even if it's unconscious, of what happened in the traumatic experience as a child, as an adult, your heartbeat changes. But because our nervous system is not rewired and it's been under chronic stress, you're not even aware that it's changing, or you can't pinpoint why those things are happening. You can't pinpoint the triggers. You basically just feel like you're doomed and that you're just unlucky and that this is how your body works. It's very difficult to notice the tension, the gut sensation. The gut is its own brain, and it is true what they say, like gut instinct. But when it's clogged up by all this unprocessed emotions, because emotions get stuck in the body, you're not going to listen to your gut. You're not going to be able to hear your gut. And so, a lot of what we're talking about here has to do with energy, the lack of vitality that is causing your inability to have the capacity to deal with life. Why do we have a lack of vitality, which is energy? Well, because unconsciously, you're not doing this consciously, but 95% of your day is actually operated by your subconscious mind. So you're just repeating all of these patterns because you haven't introduced the healing work to have enough vitality to go above the patterns of thinking. You need energy for that. You need prana. So that's why willpower is not enough. When it comes to the nervous system and the brain, you have got to rebuild that prana so you can then have energy to go above the patterns of thinking. And that's why we don't have awareness. That's why we also don't have introception because we're constantly trying to escape the body because we don't feel safe in it. And we don't feel safe in it, not just because it's like jambalaya, it's because adrenaline and cortisol are constantly moving through our bodies. These are hormones that make us feel like we're unsafe. And then that causes even more disease, right? So think of introspection as the doorway into awareness. And awareness, I can tell you right now, is the regulating moment. It's not, how can I not have any more emotions? It's I am aware of my emotions. Once you become aware of your emotions, that's when you can introduce what Jesus in A Course in Miracles says, I am willing to see this differently. When you live in those moments of the gap, you don't send the text message, you don't project out your pain, you don't make it about yourself, and you can pause. I'm not saying you're gonna get rid of your emotions. You could still be angry, you could still be sad, but when you actually have the nervous system capacity to not react and project through the meditation practice, you can then introduce what Jesus says in A Course of very simplified words of, I am willing to see this differently, God, higher power, or just, I am willing to see this differently. That's what you want to say. Because what you are then doing is you are inviting a higher power to help you with this situation instead of allowing your ego, which is your programming that tells you that people are always after you, to react. And we need that because if we react, the pattern is going to continue 1,000%. You have to respond differently. I'm not saying it's all love and light. You got to go hug the person, give them a kiss, and become their best friend. Not at all. It might be, I need to create distance right now because I'm protecting you from you, unconscious person, not even me, right? It's you. I know who I am. You need protection. And then I'm going to move myself so that I can be with myself and not project and actually then ask a higher consciousness, God, I'm willing to see this differently. Because if you're able to say that, now you're inviting God from within to help you through this. So a lot of people complicate this and think that, well, what do I do with my emotions? As long as you are aware of them, that actually regulates your nervous system, believe it or not. Why? Because it's the repetitive, reactive hamster wheel that continues the pattern. And it's not because we're unlucky or we're being punished, it's because we lack awareness. It's because we lack awareness. You cannot regulate a state that you cannot feel. It's like what they say, you cannot change what you're not aware of. And most of us are 95% of the way the day unaware. We're just on a program. And if you can feel the shift, you can then interrupt the pattern by responding differently. And this is why education alone doesn't free you. You can know your patterns, you can go to talk therapy and know why you are the way you are or feel the way you feel, right? But if awareness drops out because your nervous system is not rewired, the body is going to decide before your logic does. And then you're going to project out your pain. And even if you get rid of your parents, your whoever hurt you, your Judas, it's going to repeat itself because you incarnated into this life. First of all, into this world, the Course says, Jesus says that we incarnate like sick patients. We're souls that are evolving and becoming the Christ. And many of us has had many reincarnations and we're here to learn, right? And all these people that you consider your Judas or someone who has hurt you, even if they transition and you never see them again, or even if they basically disappear from your life, guess what? Without you doing the work of forgiveness, the work of changing your nervous system and brain, that person is going to show up as another person. They're called shadow figures in A Course in Miracles. It's going to show up as your boss, your new romantic partner, your neighbor, the person you see at the grocery store. Why? Because this is a university where you came to learn. So it's important for us to develop capacity so that we can even become aware of these patterns. But then it's not just aware of the patterns, as well, then I got to introduce the meditation, which we know our brains are very plastic and the brain is connected to the nervous system. We can absolutely rewire regardless of how many programs we have within us. Now, regulation in itself, I want to define it clearly so you have a better understanding of how it feels in your body. Because again, regulation doesn't mean you're calm, it's capacity, right? And capacity means that you can feel stress. You can feel all these different emotions and you can feel all these different sensations without losing the choices that you're going to make about them, meaning you're also not going to identify with them. You are not your emotions. You have emotions, but when our nervous system is very dysregulated chronically, we think we are our emotions. And when you identify with your emotions, we got a problem there because then there is going to be shame. There is going to be guilt. And with shame and guilt, my God, it is so difficult to come back into regulation. So it's you not losing the choice to make in the moment. Regulation actually feels like you can feel your body, even in a very uncomfortable conversation, and you can still think and speak. Regulation feels like you can feel the emotion, but you don't need to act on it. You don't have to project it out. That's what 99% of people do without sovereignty training. They're constantly projecting out what they cannot sustain within their hearts. You can feel a trigger. In fact, welcome the triggers because triggers are what shows you what still needs to be healed inside of you. Life is one big mirror. And most people, they'll feel triggered and they'll hate the person more. They'll judge the person more for triggering them. That person is there to liberate you because that trigger is not inside that person. That trigger is inside of you, which means that person is not causing it. The person is giving you a mirror of what can be evolved in you, not fixed. You can call it healed, but to me, healing is evolution. So you might still be triggered, but you can pause. How many keyboard warriors do we have out in this world? Look at social media. You can absolutely tell who has some severe nervous system dysregulation problems because it's made to piss you off, everything that they put on social media, right? And then people fall for it and they are on there attacking each other. Why? And they wouldn't say these things probably in person because they'll get their ass beat probably. But and a lot of it is bots too. Believe me, a lot of it is bots that actually make people fight against each other. That's something that they've been working on since like 2005 with somebody who's on the e-files. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name because then you know how everything's being heard and watched. But this dude was studying all that stuff, bots, how to get people against each other. That's why social media was created. And so people are triggered and then they're like, "Trrr." They can't hold themselves back. Why? Because their nervous system is so dysregulated for a long period of time. And you might say, well, we have to speak up. You can speak up from a place of power, but most people are not speaking up from a place of power. They're speaking up from a place of victimhood and of anger. And the thing is that that will be their demise. We were talking about this with activists. A lot of activists inside of my TikTok lives. If you join us there, we're there Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, building a very beautiful community there with sovereign sisters like you. Basically, we're talking about activists, and there's a lot of activists that really come from a place of rage and anger because they want the world to change. And when they're so attached to that world, an outcome of the world changing with anger and rage, it becomes so deteriorating for them that many of the activists don't live to be very long for a very long time because of anger and rage can cause some serious illnesses within you. And so when we rewire our nervous system, we become what in Buddhist terms is known as the bodhisattva. And it requires spiritual healing and evolution to become a bodhisattva, right? It's not like something that we can just name ourselves for because a bodhisattva is somebody who delays their own enlightenment and nirvana in order to help other beings that are suffering move through their journey. But a bodhisattva has learned how to sit with her own pain because when you learn to sit with your own pain and transmute it, make it part of the whole, then you truly can have compassion for others. You meaning you're not going to feel sorry for them or take on their pain or even be attached to an outcome of changing them. And that gives you a limitless, boundless mind. It gives you limitless, boundless energy where you can still be compassionate, present, but not have this attachment of having to fix anything or anyone. It's almost like you're in so much trust and surrender because your nervous system is regulated or you do that work every single day that the change happens very naturally and beautifully and you don't burn out. All the work that you do, it's like you have endless energy to be able to do this very holy work of activism of whatever it is that you're assisting with, which by the way, the highest form of activism for any woman is to heal herself. Because when she does, 7 generations before her and after her are healed. We want to take on projects. And it's important for us to get involved and do all these different things, but you cannot bypass your own healing first. Because having that savior complex, which is what we're talking about in our live on this week, is everything to do with I would rather take on projects because I'm bypassing what's really going on in here. And we need to be careful about that, right? So regulation means that you can feel that trigger, but you can pause. You might still feel angry. You're a human being. You might still even feel shaky, sadness, grief. You can prevent that from happening. But awareness is what stays online the entire time. So regulation looks more like you don't send that text message immediately. You don't chase an answer to try to calm your anxiety. You don't over explain to be understood. You can say no without collapsing forward. You can tolerate even disappointments without spiraling into danger. That's regulation. You see how it has nothing to do with calm? It's capacity, capacity to move through life. Now, for cycle breakers, it's important because cycle breakers often think that the pattern starts when they blow up or when they shut down. That's not when the pattern starts. The pattern starts earlier. The pattern starts the moment that you no longer are aware of the conscious or the state of consciousness that you're in. And I'm going to give you three early signals that awareness is leaving. And this gets easier. It becomes very natural once you begin the journey of rewiring your nervous system through Kundalini Yoga meditation and, of course, the miracle spiritual psychotherapy. At the beginning, you might have to remember these things and you might have to train yourself to move through these three steps, but then it becomes just a natural process. Number one, you're going to notice your breath. When you start to feel that your breath is getting super shallow, like you're holding it in very tight in the body, you're losing your point of awareness. So, this is a perfect time to remove yourself from the situation, to really just bring yourself into the present by simply accepting what you are feeling. Don't try to change it. The more you resist something, the more that it'll persist. So it's not about changing it. It's just like, oh dear, I'm in this state of consciousness. I can feel my breath. My body's trying to signal something to me. Okay, here I am, right? Another way you can tell if you are losing your awareness is your face starts to change. The jaw, for a lot of people, like, and they don't notice. There was a woman in my community who shared with us we've been working this month on the soul body, and which is Saibong, which is our connection to our truth, our soul, which is not jambalaya. It's an energetic electromagnetic field. Your soul is not damaged. It's the energy that sustains the soul, which is the arc of life, which sits right in the around your body. And there's this area of energy between the arc of life and the aura. The arc of life, a lot of mystics talked about this, is what projects the energy inward. It's the light. The aura, which is the electromagnetic field that also lives around the body, is what projects the energy outward. Your soul exists in this omnipresent field that is the arc of life and the aura. And your soul is not damaged by the trauma or by life, religion, genocide, and war. Your soul cannot express itself in that arc of life because that arc of life, think of it as like there was a storm that came in and everything is, destroyed there. So it needs to be reorganized. And what we do in Kundalini Yoga with our meditations, it awakens energy at the fourth vertebrae of your spine, which is Kundalini, which reorganizes your entire, not just your aura, arc of life, but your entire energetic field. And when your entire energetic field is reorganized through breath, mantra, meditation, which is what we do in Kundalini Yoga, now your soul can express itself. And now you stop giving yourself all these crazy identities, which is what trauma does to us. It's not what happens, it's inside of us. We have all these identities of I'm separate from God, I'm not good enough, I'm broken, I'm the anxious one, all these different things, right? So the soul is our true identity. And when we understand that, we understand ourselves as infinite beings having this human experience, which changes our entire nervous system and brain. Because a third part of how you notice when you are not aware anymore is your belly tightens, your chest closes up, your body leans forward like urgency, or it could collapse, right? But all these three things that I mentioned with your breath, with your face, with your body, this is a doorway. What happens to us is that we feel these things, and then what do? Shame and guilt. Oh, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel this way. That wound, I think I read this in Women Who Run with the Wolves. If any of you have read that book, let me know in the comments. It's amazing. Every woman, especially every young woman, they need, I mean, if you have a daughter who's 14, she's ready to read this book. But there's a quote from Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she says something about the wound being that doorway, that entry point. We reject the wound. We don't want to touch it. We don't want to make it worse. We don't want to look at it. And this is exactly what I mean about awareness. When you start to feel your belly tighten, your chest closing, your jaw tightening, the breath changing, which you will be able to retrain that again. A lot of us can't even feel any of this. When you start to regulate your nervous system through Kundalini Yoga meditation, you'll be able to sense these things and you won't run away because you'll have the capacity to understand that in this wound, in this sensation, it is a doorway. It's not something negative, it is a doorway. And once you understand that this is a doorway, which is the byproduct of changing your nervous system and brain, it's not just woo woo or like all love and light. You know, God absolutely is there to assist you, but we gotta do the biophysical part first of changing your nervous system and brain to be able to understand that this is a doorway and that this is the moment my sovereignty begins. So rewiring, what it really means is that it's more than a breakthrough moment. It's rewiring is a new setting. It's a default for your nervous system. And in fact, you can measure this and what it actually feels like. One, you're gonna notice things sooner. You're going to notice when your body starts to move into these sensations that I just mentioned. So that means that you're going to be able to catch it and not react because that reaction is going to keep the pattern going. Number two, you're going to return faster. So let's say you get super activated, a lot of adrenaline or cortisol, big problem happens at work, in your marriage, at home, whatever. You cannot control other people, right? But you might get activated. You might even yell at someone. You might even project out your pain, but you return faster. You don't stay hijacked for hours, months, sometimes years. How many women have been hijacked for years or their entire lifetime? You don't stay shut down for days. You're able to have the capacity to have conversations, to face it, to confront it. That's when you know you're rewiring your nervous system. Number three, you learn to choose differently. I'm not saying perfectly. I'm saying differently. Instead of reacting and doing the same thing over and over again, which is insanity and expecting a new result, I'm willing to see this differently. I'm willing to not send the text, to not react and give myself space. Because the only reason why you react is because your nervous system is so hijacked and also because the ego is ruling your life, which we're going to talk about here next. Because the ego wants to be right. It does not care about peace. And the ego is your programming. It's not your enemy. I wouldn't necessarily say it's your amigo but it's not your enemigo. Enemigo means enemy. It's not your amigo because basically what it's trying to do is survive. Your ego is your programming that knows this part of the mind that once you awaken and become aware of who you really are, no more ego. And that's why it's freaking out all the time. Like, I need to keep her in these stories and identities because, oh my God, if she realizes how powerful she is and that she's whole and complete, then she's not going to have any need for me. So, when you are stopping, when you are softening, when you are telling the truth sooner, when you stop abandoning yourself and you speak up, that's rewiring, believe it or not. And especially if you're speaking up not from victimhood. And this is something you have to train in the nervous system and brain, but from a place of solution, solution oriented. And ultimately, it really is if the person's crying out for help, it's if you can accept the Christ in you, which is what we do here in our community through Kundalini therapy and A Course in Miracles, you'll be able to see the Christ in anyone, even what you would call a Judas, right? And you'll know that that person is evolving. That does not mean you become a doormat and they can walk all over you. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is emotional intelligence. They're not doing what they're doing because of my worth. They're doing what they're doing because of their level of unconsciousness, their level of a nervous system, right? Now, when it comes to generational trauma, why this is inherited, it basically we have to understand that it's not just stories, right? It's patterns. It's our nervous system state and how we cope with life. That's what gets passed down. It's these stress settings. A family basically normalizes urgency. That's just how life is. I know for a long time in my life, it was just, I was always in a hurry. And even if I was on time, I was in a hurry. There's urgency. Everything has to get done. Everything has to get done, right? Also, a family that can normalize silence. That's really big. Really, really big. When we normalize silence and we don't allow and validate ourselves or someone doesn't validate us as children. I'm not saying as adult, you don't even need that as an adult, right? But as children, we relied on our parents, we relied on our caretakers. And if they did not see us and allowed us to share our truth or what we were feeling or expressing, it's not that they did that because they were evil. Their nervous systems did not have the capacity. So when you go talk to your parents and you tell them something happened to you and they reject you, it's not because they hate you. It's not they don't have the capacity in the nervous system to deal with it. That's like saying, I don't know what the solution to this problem is, so I'm just gonna pretend it's not there, or I'm gonna project my pain because it probably happened to your parent too, and my hurt, and return this back and shift the blame to her, to the person that's telling me. So you see how it goes back to that with silence? We also have families that normalize emotional numbness, or families that can normalize just always living in hypervigilant, looking for the next shoe to drop. So this is especially true for families that have gone through a lot of grief. If there have been a lot of transitions, a lot of especially unexpected transitions, unalivings, deaths in the family, that grief, becomes a hypervigilance in the brain, which is a program that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, which a lot of people confuse with their families being cursed. Your family's not cursed. If you understood the power of God within you, you would never be afraid of curses. I'm not saying that people don't try, but if you know who you are and you're connected to God from within because you've done work on your nervous system and brain, nothing can help you. And nothing can assist or hurt you, excuse me, not help you. God can help you, right? But nothing can hurt you. But the problem is that we're so hijacked in the nervous system and the brain, we're constantly scanning for danger. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then we say, oh, our family is cursed. No, your family is not cursed. Your family is wired for danger in the nervous system. So a cycle breaker sometimes very often feels like, oh my God, I'm just carrying something that isn't even mine. You don't know how many times I've worked with women that have said, I don't even know why I feel the way I feel. Like I'm always sad and I don't even know. I can't pinpoint it. Well, there's a couple of things with that. First of all, if something happened to you in your childhood, your subconscious mind is sometimes so powerful in its form that it blocks it as a memory. But even if it blocks it as a memory, it's your personality. And so you're living it out. And we don't have to remember what happened to us. And we don't even have to talk about what happened to us. What we have to do is practice the yoga, practice the Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy, which is a reminder of the truth of who you are. In that way, then the memories will fall off of the body and we will be able to feel safe again. That's how we rewire the nervous system. And in many ways, when we think about this, as a cycle breaker, you are carrying things that are not even yours, right? Because the nervous system inherits these settings through what was modeled, through what was needed during that time for your ancestors, your grandparents, your parents to survive, right? So when one woman arrives and says, "This ends with me," that's why it feels so heavy because you're not only changing behavior here, you're changing an entire system. And that requires vitality, it requires capacity in the nervous system. So, I want to talk next about the spiritual root of this. I've shared a lot of the science of the energetics and how Kundalini yoga therapy actually works and what you can expect as it relates to rewiring and regulation. But there's a very important spiritual component that is associated to this. And it has to do with awareness, but also the fact that, especially if you're a cycle breaker, we have a bigger issue, which is known as the authority problem. Jesus teaches us about this inside of A Course in Miracles. And when I learned about this and when I actually applied it in my life, it was so life changing. It was immediate acceptance and surrender to God within me. And it is what keeps me anchored back into this state of consciousness of peace of and it's I'm not saying constant peace because I'm growing in my life more than ever and evolving. What I'm saying is a place of presence, a place of capacity, a place of trust, faith, and surrender, even when everything outside of me looks chaotic or looks like it's changing faster than I can catch up with. And getting to the spiritual root, what we're going to talk about next, is key because what we talked about before with the nervous system and brain, we're looking at the somatics, right? Body, mind, and spirit. We're looking at the body holding and keeping score of trauma. But we have to look at the spiritual aspect because the spiritual aspect that also heals at the level of the mind. And we have to heal at the level of the mind, meaning we have to shift our perceptions and the meaning we are giving to these experiences because when we don't, we basically allow these identities, false identities, to become who we are, which we're not, right? So getting to the spiritual root is important, and it's important to understand that some of you are not even afraid of trauma. You're not actually afraid of facing these things that your ancestors could not face before. What we're really afraid of as a cycle breaker is awareness. Awareness. And one thing that I need to mention is that Kundalini Yoga is known as the mother of awareness. And it's not that she forces you through guilt and shame to change the practice. It's that you build the capacity in the nervous system and the brain to become aware so that you can make a choice where you want to make those changes. Again, you cannot change what you're not aware of. But as a cycle breaker, we're actually very afraid of awareness. Why? Well, because awareness actually brings you face to face with God, believe it or not. And if you were trained through trauma, chaos, even religion, religion teaches you that you're separate from God. If you were trained through colonization, think of all the ways our ancestors went through war and colonization. That's severe trauma. And when these colonizations and wars happen, they're done in a strategic way so that the 5, 6 generations after them feel the pain and feel the trauma. It's very, very unfortunate and sad. It doesn't have to happen because you and I are here to break the cycle, right? But through colonization, war, genocide, trauma that we went through in our own families, we've been taught that God is separate from us and that awareness then will feel anything but peaceful. So when you believe that you are separate from God because that's what you've been told, awareness is 1,000% gonna feel very unsafe. It's not gonna feel like peace. Why? Because awareness is gonna feel more to you like exposure, like punishment, because Again, you believe that there might be a God that sits on a chair and judges you all day. And a lot of the times it's also about, as a cycle breaker, like you think, and I had to work through this myself. Where was God when I needed God? Where was God when I was going through that traumatic experience, right? And we develop resentment and anger towards God, but we don't consciously say that. It's unconscious. And we don't consciously say that because we're afraid of the false God that religion has taught us about. In Gnostic teachings, which are the teachings of Jesus Christ, which Gnostic means God, you having an experience with God within you. No middleman, no guru, no priest, right? And beautiful teachings, same teachings as A Course in Miracles, same teachings as Jesus Christ. When you know that there's no middle person between you and God, then awareness, it feels like peace because you know that God is a loving God. In Gnostic teachings, they talk about a demiurge, which is a false God. That's the false God of the Bible. And like I've said many times here, with the Bible, not only has it been rewritten and sections taken out many times, but truly, Christ did not create Christianity or Catholicism. Christ did not say, follow me and worship me. Christ said, you will go do bigger things than I have done. And that's what you're here to do as a soul. And a big part of that is healing the relationship with God from within, rebuilding that temple. Why? Because when we do that, awareness is not going to feel like a punishment. It's not going to feel like I'm going to get in trouble once God knows that I have resentment towards God or that I did all these things, right? And this is where Jesus in A Course in Miracles names the pattern even deeper than this, because what we learn in A Course in Miracles is what is known as the authority problem. Now, the authority problem in everyday language is basically, in conventional settings, don't tell me what to do. Or I don't trust leaders. I don't trust institutions. I don't trust the church, the government, right? But this is way deeper than that. The issue isn't mainly like the rules, it's authorship. It's discomfort with God being the author and creator of you, the one who defines who we are. Isn't that wild? Like, we've been told we're separate from God. And because of the trauma that we've been through, we don't believe we're holy. We don't believe we're an expression of God. We don't believe that God created us. We think that God just created Jesus Christ, Joshua, but not us. We think we're the scum of the earth. You might not be thinking that consciously. You're thinking that unconsciously. But there's another problem with this. Then there's other people, they may have gone through trauma as well. In fact, they went through trauma. That's the way they are. And they believe that they are God. We're expressions of God. Look at the people in leadership right now and look at how many of them abuse their power. Why? Because they don't know that they are creations of God. They are trying to be God herself or himself, however you see God. That's a problem. And that's the ego's fantasy. Your programming. I will author myself. I will define myself. I will be self made. So the authority problem is not mainly rebellion, actually. It's actually a crisis point. It's a crisis around being created. And so the authority problem in everyday life, even though it sounds like, don't tell me what to do, I don't trust leaders, I don't trust the government, it's deeper than that. The authority problem has everything to do with your issue that God created you. We have a problem with God being our author, God having authored our existence, God setting what we are, our nature, our identity, our true identity, which is one thing, right? But being authored by God and what you are is a total kind of authority. So the authority problem, what Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, is actually beginning and starts behind this illusion of separation. And even in the Bible and scripture, there's sections that reinterpret this very self-creation problem that I'm talking about. Like, for example, when they talk about eating the apple of the tree of knowledge in Genesis, that's a very common story, right? It's symbolizing incorporating the ability for self creation, trying to author yourself. And it's not because you did wrong by eating from the apple of knowledge or the serpent is evil. No. God said, I want to go express myself through you. I am now giving you access to knowledge so you can remember who you are. Me expressing myself through you. You, my highest daughter of God, right? But the way the religion twisted it, they made it seem like the serpent was evil, and if you took a bite of the apple of knowledge, then now that means that you are trying to author yourself or that you are trying to usurp God's power, which it's freaking ironic because the way religion says it is actually the way we try to become God ourselves. Why? Because we're judging God and thinking that God made a mistake by giving us access to knowledge. Isn't that wild? You see how layered this is? The other way that we see this is the root of all evil. In A Course in Miracles, Jesus says this plainly. The authority problem is the root of all evil. You trying to usurp God's power, meaning you not accepting that God authors you. You have free will, and a lot of people will argue with me about this. Well, what about all these people that are doing evil things? God gives us free will in the physical form. You go all at it. Create all the karma, which karma is not good or bad. Karma is there's an action and there's a reaction to that, right? Go ahead, because God wants to express herself through you, right? Create as much karma as you want in this physical realm. Repeat the incarnation because it's a form of slavery. Jesus Christ came to teach us not about the crucifixion, it's about the resurrection, about how to end the cycle of reincarnation, which we do only because we still are students, patients that need to come into the world to learn how to unconditionally love, unconditionally forgive, like Jesus Christ. So we have free will in this physical. Go all at it. Do what you want to do, boo boo. In fact, I think the people that we can tend to call evil that really hurt a lot of people in this world, they are very young souls, but they're still becoming the Christ, right? Ultimately, you have free will in the physical, but you do not have free will in the spiritual. You're going to come back home to Christ, to God, to your Christ, the Christ consciousness inside of you, the Christ light. Might take you a few lifetimes, but you are not under you in the spiritual realm, it's God's will. And we have such a problem with that because we want to control it all. We want to control it all because it goes back to the nervous system. When we don't have a regulated nervous system, we've lived under chronic stress, we think we have to control it all. We think we have to control our children, our everything, even our business. If God is your author, when you run out of energy, it's because you're working alone. You're not working with God anymore. Everything is of God. And if you don't understand that, you're going to get caught up in a lot of lessons that are going to show you through the ego programming. The other thing is the devil. The devil, they talk a lot about this to scare people, but it's not an external being, it's an actual belief. And what's the most demonic thing? You believing that you created yourself and then you can throw off God's fatherhood or motherhood, however you want to see it, and author yourself. Demonic is basically this is demonic in itself in character because it opposes God by denying God as the creator, as the source. And look at all these people out there. They're trying to make the second coming of Christ. They're trying to force God to come back to the earth. You can't force God. Like, who do you think you are? Like, they're trying to make it biblical and religious. The same little country, the size of New Jersey that starts with an I, constantly trying to make biblical prophecies the truth, forcing God to come back. You, who gave you that authorship to do that? That's demonic. That's the devil. It's these beliefs that these people have that I created myself, and I can throw off God's fatherhood and author myself. That's the real demonic problem. When we are not working with God, we are working with our ego. You're working with the belief system. And why we don't work with God is what I just shared with you before. It's not that your soul is damaged, it's just that you need to reorganize your entire bio electromagnetic field so that your soul can express itself in your body. And when your soul can express itself in your body, that means that you are fully functional in God. There's a lot of people that I can give you as an example that do this very well. One example that I always talk about is Michael Singer he wrote the book Untethered Soul, but the perfect example is the book The Surrender Experiment. This is a story of his real life. He built a multi-million dollar company, but his only focus was to surrender to God. His only focus was to his morning sadhana practice because he practiced Kriya Yoga as well, and his evening sadhana practice. That was his only focus. Everything else was God moving through him. And a lot of people think, oh, if I let move through me, I'm gonna have to do things I don't like, I don't want. That's not the truth. The truth is you're gonna do bigger things. God is always trying to give you a bigger kingdom than you can ever imagine. But we're so stuck, and I created myself. I can throw off what God's fatherhood or motherhood does for me, and I can figure it out on my own. And how has that worked out in your life? Hasn't worked out well. A lot of reason is because as a cycle breaker, authority actually feels like a threat to us. I mean, think about it. If you grew up around a lot of unsafe power, a partner, a parent, a church, a system, your nervous system learned a rule that authority is actually dangerous, right? So then when you approach God, the deepest and only authority, your body's gonna brace. And it's not because God is dangerous, it's because your nervous system and your brain were trained to expect punishment. And once you believe authority equals punishment, your identity is going to be very, very fragile. That's what I'm talking about with no emotional intelligence, right? Why? Well, because now you think you have to protect yourself from being seen. So then you create all these crazy rules. I am the strong one. I'm the good one. Look at him, God. Look at her. Look what she's doing. That's why we project things out. Or I'm the fixer. I'm the invisible one. I'm the anxious one. And then that role becomes your false identity. That's why we're working this month inside of the sanctuary with soul, Saibong, soul sovereignty, above and beyond all these false identities that we give ourselves. Why? Well, because it feels safer than fully being seen and known by God, fully accepting that God sees you as whole, beautiful, complete, and light. That is what scares us. And the ego, which is your programming, has these really clever moves, especially with what is known as non-duality. The ego, I mean, there's not an insult or anything at all, but some people will say things like, I am God as the highest truth. You're not God, you're an expression of God. Or maybe even the ego has some crazy strategies, which is our programming, where there's discomfort with being authored by God. Again, we don't believe it because we're like, well, where was God when I went through that stuff? Or it gets rebranded as ultimate spirituality, right? So the disease becomes enlightenment, right? But the whole thing is that Jesus Christ completely reframes this in A Course in Miracles because ultimate oneness with God is true. That's what yoga is. It's union with God. Yet God is still the greater one, the source, the our author. And that's the whole thing. Like it's so weird because like if you accepted that God authored you, you would heal instantaneously, but we're so resistant because of the nervous system and our lack of awareness. And because we do that, we refuse that this greater than God is like the mask that forces us to be in this authority problem. Like we have issues with hierarchy, but it's not because of God, it's because of the way authority has been basically abused in your life. That's at the core of why we're so afraid. And so the right way out is we got to get real that there actually is no problem. I know it's insane, but when there is no authority, there's no problem. What I mean by this is that modern culture avoids God. Atheism or God removal could be actually a symptom of if God is the ultimate authority, removing God removes the problem, right? So atheists think that the problem is the authority, God. So if I remove God, then the problem is removed. And we all know how that works out. And I'm not judging atheists at all. By the way, I keep using the word God, but God could mean a lot of things to you. You know, God can mean a higher power, source, the universe. You can call God so many different words. In Kundalini Yoga, we call God, I mean, the closest word, because it's how could we ever find a word for God, right? Is Wahe Guru, which is the exaltation of the divine from darkness to light. So, whatever you call God, even if you are an atheist, God would be then when you are in states of consciousness of gratitude, when you are in states of consciousness of surrender, of acceptance, of presence, right? But what's trippy is that most people that are atheists, they basically think that the problem is God, which is that they would have to give their authority to something that is unseen. And then they think that removing God actually removes the problem. And even in contemporary spirituality, we see like prayer to a higher power and meditation, pure awareness, right? Where there's like no other. When we say that, we can very subtly bypass goddess authority, meaning, is there a real connection there? Because if you're thinking that God is outside of you, you're not understanding that God is within you. And so we try to just create this like pure awareness, or we pray to a higher power that we think like is in the heavens or is outside of us. And that also is a way that we very quietly bypass God as the authority, because we're like, oh, we don't know where God is. And I'm just gonna grow my awareness, but I don't realize that God is within me. And where even where God is actually embraced, like in worship cultures or, churches and things of that places, it can actually be rooted in fear. Think about these churches that teach from the Bible. They're teaching from a Bible that was changed three different times. One of them, King James, like he was so against anything in the Bible that would contradict any authority to a government that he took it all out. So like these priests or these pastors, they're not even teaching from the true teachings of Jesus Christ. And typically what I've seen is that and there's some great community churches, and the community aspect is so powerful, but what they're teaching from the Bible is a lot of things that are rooted in fear. Like basically God is going to punish you if you don't come to church. God is going to punish you if you don't study the Bible or read the Bible, although many churches don't even encourage that and say that only the priests can do that. Or God is going to punish you if you don't give your 10%. So everything is like rooted in fear. If you don't do this, wait till God gets to you, right? Or we're always like in church trying to appease an imagined angry authority. Like, I can't even, I would always question that as a young girl. Like, I would always ask my mom, why did God allow this to happen? Like, who is God really? Until I got to meet God myself inside of me. But it's trippy because, like, if life happens, like, we think that God is punishing us. We think that God is this angry, which is this false God, the demiurge. So we're constantly living in stress. So you better believe we're not going to give our authority to our father if we believe our father or mother, however you see God, is an angry person. It's like imagine if your parents were, and maybe this happened to you, if they were constantly angry at you, why would you want to say that they created you or that they have authority over you? You'd be pissed. And that's what we do with God, right? And we don't see ourselves and we don't see the way we avoid God. And we all do this. Believe me, I did this for a long time. I avoided God as my authority because I felt that I always had to control every part of my life. But we cannot, once I rewired my nervous system and brain through A Course in Miracles, spiritual psychotherapy, and through Kundalini Yoga therapy, I understood. I was able to change the perception, the meaning, the belief, and I understood that I cannot usurp God's power. The belief, in fact, that we can self-create is really insane. Really, like, literally inconceivable. And that's why there's so much toxic manifestation tricks. How many manifestation coaches? Dude, you're not manifesting anything. You're co-creating with God. When you are manifesting, you're doing that with the ego, and that is not going to be sustainable. You are going to be afraid to lose it. You will lose it. You're going to be like Smeagol, right? From the Lord of the Rings. My ring, my precious, because it wasn't created through God. It was created through your ego. So the belief that we can self-create with all these toxic I don't even use that word. I call it co-creation with God, materialization of God's will. But we have to become a vessel through the nervous system and brain to allow God to move through us. Because our brain is constantly downloading information. It's not creating consciousness, it's downloading it. And you're either downloading it from the universal mind, which is God, omnipresent within you and all and everywhere, or you're downloading it from the program, from the illusion of separation of God, from the way you experience life because of the traumas that you went through. So it's inconceivable for you to believe that you can co-create without God. You might be manifesting, but that's not sustainable. And that's quite insane, to be honest with you. So if you think about it, God is not really angry. We are still all as God created us. That was one of the most powerful, life-changing lines that Jesus says in A Course in Miracles that completely changed my life. Especially recently, we've been doing the soul body meditation in my community, and I practice with all of our community members. We're all teachers, walking each other back home. And even though I've practiced many of these meditations, I want to experience moment by moment what our community members are experiencing because a true teacher has experienced it, not just read it through a book, right? And a true teacher makes sure that her students or her community members become better teachers than her, like Jesus Christ, right? But this knowing that we are as God created us changes the entire illusion of separation and the entire authority problem. Because a lot of us, like, we make mistakes in this world and then we go into these shame and guilt spirals when you have to understand, first of all, sin is not real. The root meaning of sin is missing the mark. And it's missing the mark of you accepting you as God sees you, as light, as whole and complete. And you might make mistakes, although I truly do believe there is no mistake that we can ever make. But we might make decisions that put us on this path that we feel needs to be corrected or changed. Even if you do that, even if you do the worst thing in this world, it does not change the worth and how God sees you at your core. And I want you to think about like even them like saints, for example. If you look at their stories, most of the saints have a very heavy, dark past, but they were able to transmute the darkness into the light. Wahe Guru, from darkness to light. So does that mean that God doesn't love them anymore? Or even when they were in their darkness, like all these people that we see that are evil, do you think God doesn't love them? God loves them. And God is constantly trying to connect with them, but they have an authority problem and they think they authored themselves, so they cannot hear God. They cannot hear their soul. And God is not mocked. or made fun of. We're seeing that right now. You cannot escape God's punishment, is what the Christians tell you, the religion. What that means is you can't make God's creation unholy. You are not an inherent sinner. You are as God created you. God would be mocked if any creation lacked holiness. That's the only way we mock God. If any one of us were truly not holy, and we all are. So you cannot turn holiness into sin. You cannot alter what you already are. You can't change that. Nothing that you do, nothing that happens outside of you can change that you are holy. Humility is accepting your holiness. Believe it or not, you're not being humble by not accepting your holiness. The ego can be very grandiose, but it could also dim its life. That's our light and power. That's the ego. And you cannot turn holiness into something bad. That's who you are at your core, holy. You cannot alter what God created ever. And so then true identity is important to understand that it's unalterable. Your identity, who you are, a soul, the light, is not up for grabs. Self esteem, for example, it's going to be stable, not based on your achievements or approval of from someone else or money. It's stable when you remember that you are as God created you because you changed your nervous system and your brain. And then forgiveness is going to be really easy with the nervous system that has been rewired through the spiritual psychotherapy of A Course in Miracles, which we study every Tuesday in A Course in Miracles. My sister, I'm sorry, my community, the Sovereign Sister at Sanctuary, my sister teaches it actually. Amazing. I've been a student since 2008, and I get to sit on the student seat. Amazing. It's absolutely life-changing every single Tuesday. That's the devotion. And when you start to do that, you recognize what you and others truly are. I am as God created me, as the premier lesson. You are holy. That's what we're working on this month in our community. The vision of holiness aligned with Saibon, our soul identity, because you have to remember that that's who you are. And again, it's in the nervous system and the brain. We change that, but it's also the spiritual psychotherapy of bringing healing of the mind, where you're reminded about all this, right? So do not deny your fear of God's authority. You got to bring the fear to the relationship. I'm afraid to look God in the eye. You can honestly say that. I had to come to a point where I had to have a conversation with God within me and be honest about how much resentment I was holding. And I had a beautiful experience one time after a Course in Miracles class that I wasn't even meditating. I was washing the dishes. And I had this like feeling come over me where God was like speaking to me very loud, and God was saying, "My beautiful daughter, I love you, and I will never forsaken you. I have never forsaken you. I've always been here with you." And I was like, it was almost like a feeling like if God was like, I love you and forgive me. Even though the words forgive me didn't come out, it was almost like God was like reassuring me and making me feel like nothing had ever gone wrong. And then I had this deep moment of like purging, of crying and crying because I was like, I'm so sorry that I ever had this resentment towards you. I'm so sorry that I ever did not trust you, that I ever felt that you were punishing me. And it was like God was just cradling me in this like nurturing hug where I could finally feel not just safe, but actually like experience how God actually sees me. And that was such a life-changing moment. That's when my relationship with Jesus Christ, Joshua, healed because a lot of it was I was really like angry at religion because I was angry at the fact that they were like teaching the wrong things, and then also at the fact that it felt like they continued to make us feel separate from God. So I was trying to blame someone, and that kept me far from the actual teachings of Christ. And it wasn't until I got to this point where I was like, oh my God, I didn't know I was holding all this within me. And it was because I felt safe enough to know that God was a loving God, and that even if I admitted these things, right, or that I brought them to awareness, that there wasn't going to be a God that was going to be punishing me. And that's where the spiritual psychotherapy really changed my life, right? Where the Kundalini Yoga therapy at the same time with changing my nervous system and brain, I had the capacity to be confrontational with these beliefs that I had about God. And I was able to look at God in the eyes, in the heart, whatever that, I mean, it's impossible to describe what that was because it was just all light, all light. And God's response to me was love. It was affirmation. It was safety. And that's what I mean about the kingdom of heaven existing within you. It's not when you transition and leave these bodies, it's rebuilding that inner sanctuary through meditation. That's what Jesus Christ went to teach, right? Through the spiritual psychotherapy so that we can remember who we are. And so we stop believing that we can author ourselves, and we have to do that so that we can stop believing that others can author you as well, so that people become less harmless, and so that your identity actually stabilizes, so that if you know who you are, then it doesn't matter what people do to you or say about you or feel about you, that nothing is going to change that you are as God created you. So the correction here, which changes the nervous system and the brain and puts us in these states of regulation and co-regulation with God, is that we didn't steal anything and we cannot self-create. We cannot change what God created. Nothing we do will change how much God loves us. God is not angry. God is not punishing you or pursuing you. God's authority is not a threat. That's what they want you to believe so you can live in fear. God's authority is the guarantee of your safety. Because if God is the author, then your holiness is not up for debate. And that is why in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says, I am as God created me. And that sentence, that statement, it ends your panic, because what it's saying is my identity is not a performance, it's not a wound, it's not a role I'm playing. My identity is held in God. So when awareness does rise through the nervous system that has the capacity to deal with these things, you don't have to brace, you don't have to hide, you don't have to self create. You can remember. That's what you're here to do, remember. And because of that, in real life application, when you feel afraid of awareness, do not even try to force awareness because you can't. You have to build it through the nervous system. And that's what Kundalini Yoga meditation and Course in Miracles does. But when you start to develop it, instead of forcing yourself or trying to rush through it, it's important to not shame yourself. It's important to just like name it. Hey, I'm here. I'm in this moment. It's just a dysregulated moment. It's not who I am. Not any, no mental health instability is your identity. It's just a dysregulated moment, and we can change that. So name it, right? I'm afraid to look at it. I'm afraid to be aware. I'm afraid God will see me and reject me or punish me. And then when you do that, bring it into relationship. God, I think your authority is punishment. I think your gaze is danger. I'm willing to be shown otherwise. Or the easiest line, I am willing to see this differently. Not even I'm willing to see this through your eyes, God. I'm just willing to see this differently. And that allows God, then you release the authority problem, and now this higher power can assist you and help you, especially when it comes to these patterns of generational trauma. My God, a community is needed. Not only a community, God. And then step three, receive the correction, right? Not a lecture, just a sense of what, a felt sense in your body of, you know what, regardless of what this outcome is, I'm safe. I'm still me, my Satnam. I've never, can never change what God has created. And so, very important with this work, regulation is not calm, it's awareness. And awareness is what is sovereignty. And sovereignty is not self creation, sovereignty is remembrance. I am as God created you. Now, I hope that this episode has landed for you. I hope that you can receive this with your heart. I hope that the relationship you have with God not only heals, but that you come into union with this beautiful higher power that has always not only been there for you and your ancestors, but that will always continue to assist you and to help you move through life. Because regardless, we're all coming back home to this higher power. And why delay it? Why not remember that we are as God created us? Thank you all so much for being here. If this episode has opened something within you, a doorway, and you're ready to actually train this sovereignty with the support of a community, mentorship, coaching, then this is where you can come join us inside the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, where we're not just talking. In fact, talking is not even necessary or needed if that's not something you want to do. We live it. We train it in the nervous system and the brain with Kundalini Yoga therapy and A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy, the teachings of Jesus Christ. In the link below in the description, you can find out more about our community, and you can also reach out to me if there are any questions about the community, about the sanctuary, and about how to begin the journey today. So click on the link below in the description and join us. And of course, please share this episode with other community sisters, other friends, so that they can also join us in the movement of generational healing. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We have episodes going live every single week. I'll also be start sharing next week Spanish speaking podcast episodes for our comunidad que habla español, for our community that speaks Spanish, and I'm very excited to do that. In fact, I'm also going live on TikTok in Spanish on Tuesdays. So if your aunts, your moms, your friends that only speak Spanish are ready for this movement and this generational healing journey, then please also share the podcast with them so they can join me weekly here, of course, on the podcast, and then also on TikTok on Tuesdays. So I hope to see you there. And thank you for being part of this movement. Remember, when you heal yourself, 7 generations before and after you are healed. Satnam, everyone.